Recently, someone requested that I take a look at this video titled "The Death Toll of Capitalism." As you can see, it's done from a YouTube channel with 42,000 subscribers. YouTuber named Hakeem, as you can see, has a Lenin avatar. What a wonderful guy that Vladimir Lenin was. Has almost 20,000 views, and let's take a look at what Hakeem has to say.
Why do people play the numbers game? It's dehumanizing and doesn't hold very well as an argument on its own. Stripped of its nuance, it's simply a number, to be regurgitated as an attempt to stop a conversation before it even begins.
Yeah, I don't know who these people think they are, assessing economics and whatnot.
However, it's something we have to deal with. In my personal experience, one of, if not the most frequent objection to socialism that I've heard is, socialism killed 100 million people in the last century.
I mean, it definitely killed tens of millions of people.
It's uttered almost reflexively, as if it isn't a thought that one came up with on their own, but one that is almost taught to be shot back at a moment's notice. The figure comes from a work, notorious in its unreliability, called The Black Book of Communism. Now, we can go through each instance mentioned in the book and provide the nuance necessary to not only explain the number, but also arrive at a correct figure.
Now, notice that he talks about this book, The Black Book of Communism, as if it's the only source on this issue. I myself, I've never read this book, much less cited it, but even if you take a look at an article, a Wikipedia article, this is about the Chinese land reform. As you can see, the Chinese land reform was a campaign by the Communist Party of China and Mao Zedong. And it was a campaign that involved the mass murder of landlords by tenants and land redistribution to the peasantry. The estimated amount of casualties of the movement ranges from hundreds of thousands to millions. As you can see, it's anywhere as little as 800,000 to 2 to 3 million. And if you just look at this one paragraph of this one Wikipedia article alone, I mean, this doesn't mention other communist countries and the horrors that went on in other communist countries. You can see this one paragraph is well sourced with different sources, a variety of sources. Look at this, you guys. None of which seem to be the source, the Black Book of Communism. And I'll take it a step further. This is something, when you look at the deaths in campaigns like the landlord classified, this Chinese land reform, this is stuff that communists like Hakeem presumably support. A few years ago, I made a video called Communism Has Always Been Tried Right, hence why it sucks. And the reason why I made that, because a lot of people, including so-called anti-socialists, critics of socialism, critics of communism, promoters of capitalism, they parrot this bullshit talking point about how communism it sounds good in theory, you guys. It just doesn't work in practice. It just was never tried right, you guys. No. In my video, I draw the dots between the ideas in Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto, particularly the call to class warfare, to forcibly overthrow all existing social conditions, the overthrow of the bourgeoisie, or the ownership class, whatever the hell they want to call it these days, in attempt to abolish private property and establish a dictatorship of the proletariat. In other words, the so-called working class, whatever the hell that means. And the consequence of that, you can see that it's no surprise that these goons in these communist countries, they try to kill people that they perceive to be the so-called bourgeoisie. They hated landlords. They hate anyone who thinks that they have the audacity to own private property. And yeah, give it to the peasantry, give it to the so-called working class. So people like Hakeem, they don't really take much issue with this. Even other communists today. I want to remind you guys of a clip from a guy named Hassan Piker, who, for those who don't know, he was once part of the Young Turks network, and now he streams regularly on Twitch. From what I know, he gets tens of thousands of viewers regularly, and recently He was on Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's stream where her and her buddies, her comrades, were playing Among Us to get young people out to vote. Well, Hassan Piker was part of that stream. Let's check out what Hassan Piker has to say about landlords, genocide.
It's hurt poor people that they can afford housing in Berkeley. I don't know how that works.
My understanding is that the property owners who have properties there choose just not to rent it at all.
Yeah, kill them. Kill those motherfuckers in a video game. Sorry.
Oh, in a video game, guys. That means it doesn't count.
Holy shit. Murder those motherfuckers in the street. Let the streets soak in their fucking red capitalist bloods, dude. Let the streets
soak in their fucking red capitalist bloods, dude.
Oh my god, in a video game.
Yeah, he only meant this if you're playing SimCity or some shit like that. Anyway, these are the kind of people like AOC that they choose to pal around with, and clearly calling for the slaughter of landlords. So this isn't something that's new and not something that has gone away. And this, from what I know, this also happened in the Soviet Union. Here's another Wikipedia article. Again, seems to be pretty well sourced. And not from sources called the Black Book of Communism. And it also often results in famines. Because from what I know about the Soviet Union, in an attempt to collectivize farms and agriculture, they had to slaughter the more productive upper-class farmers in the Soviet Union. And a lot of communists, I talked about this in a recent video where I did a rebuttal to Spooky Scary Socialist. Communists like that, they think it's all justified because, farmers like the kulaks, they were hoarding all their resources. They were hoarding it. Kulaks deserved worse, they say. And then as a result, on top of that, if you kill the most productive people, imagine you did this in the United States. Imagine you took all the farmers in California and South Dakota and Nebraska and Iowa and all the farmers in the United States, and you just killed them all. Along with the top 1%, a lot of these commies bitch and moan about the top 1%. They're stealing all the wealth from the bottom 50%. Oh, no. Well, again, the top 1% is a group of 3 million people. A group of 3 million people that I'm sure Hakeem wouldn't mind taking to the guillotines. And then 100 years later, more communist apologists will say, oh, well, that's just the Black Book of Communism. Whatever, okay? But imagine in the United States, you kill the most productive people, particularly in farming, and you take all their land, you take all of their means of production, and you hand it to communist goons like Hassan Piker and Hakeem and Vosh and all the other hammer and sickle avatars on Twitter, people who probably know jack shit about farming. Not that I do. I don't know jack shit about farming, and that's a big reason why I am not in the industry of agriculture. But if you took all the productive farmers and gave it to people who knew jack shit about farming, you think you're going to get the same productive output when it comes to food and agriculture?
No, of course not.
Anyway.
Be it higher or lower, usually much, much lower, than mentioned in the book. There might be some merit to that. Better yet, why don't we turn the argument on its head? How about capitalism's death toll?
Yeah, let's look at capitalism's death toll.
First of all, we need to define our terms. What exactly makes the system we currently live under capitalism? Well, it's simple. Unlike the propagandizing sophistry of some economists...
It's just propaganda sophistry, folks. Maybe all those sources I was referring to earlier on these articles, maybe this is all propaganda. Maybe it's all sophistry. Maybe it's all sources we can just dismiss as, it's just capitalist propaganda, you guys.
And other types, capitalism can be clearly defined by the existence of 1. Markets, 2. The private ownership of the means of production, and...
Now, this is interesting, the existence of markets. I had to do a recent rebuttal to Richard Wolff, who insisted that capitalism is not a market system. I mean, that's bullshit, but I would consider it a free market system, obviously. Private ownership of the means of production, yeah, I would say private ownership of property in general. I would define capitalism as a society that respects individual rights, where government's only role is the protection of individual rights and property rights, the individual's right to life, liberty, in the pursuit of property and happiness, where individuals are free to voluntarily exchange goods and services. Now he adds wage labor on top of this, and I would say wage labor is a likely consequence of capitalism, but it is not an essential characteristic.
And 3, wage labor. Before some guy in a fedora tries to correct me, I'm talking about the scientific definition of these concepts,
The
not
scientific definition.
the colloquial terms. Capitalism is a global system.
Capitalism is a global system. You see what he's doing here, folks? He's going to classify capitalism as a global system, and you're going to see he does this so that he can essentially blame all of the deaths and all of the horrors and all of the poverty that exists in the world on capitalism. Now, we all know this is complete bullshit. This is a clear attempt to shift the goalposts to distract you from the horrors of communism.
And as a result, these factors exist, with few exceptions, globally. How does capitalism function?
Oh, I guess because markets exist all over the world, therefore the whole world is capitalism? Really?
Primarily on one single concept, the drive for profit, the profit motive. For a capitalist to be successful, he has to beat out his competition by the most ruthless methods in order to secure as high a profit as possible.
Now, this is not necessarily true. It is true that if you want to run a business, you do have to be profitable, you do have to make money, or else you won't survive for very long, but it does not necessarily mean that you have to crush your competition. As the wonderful philosopher Ayn Rand once said, a productive man is motivated by the desire to achieve, not the desire to beat others. And you can see concrete examples of this with Steve Jobs. You guys remember Steve Jobs? You know, he only built up Apple, one of the most successful companies in human history and in the world today. Let's listen to what Steve Jobs has to say. I believe this was in a 1997 event.
We're shepherding some of the greatest assets in the computer industry. And if we want to move forward and see Apple healthy and prospering again, we have to let go of a few things here. We have to let go of this notion that for Apple to win, Microsoft has to lose.
We have to let go of this notion that in order for Apple to win, Microsoft has to lose. Now, adding context to this, he talked about this after bringing Bill Gates on the event, but he elaborated about how Apple and Microsoft are working together to bring things like Microsoft Office to Macintosh and vice versa and all that good stuff. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you always have to beat out your competition. You could take an example like today, Apple and Amazon. They're both competing in the book space and the music space. Meanwhile, I buy Apple hardware like iPhones and my iMac. But a lot of my books, I don't use iBooks. I use Apple's competitor, which is Amazon and the Kindle. So it is not always true that you have to crush your competition. In a lot of ways, it might be advantageous to cooperate with your competition. And there are plenty of examples of multiple competitors in one industry, both being profitable because they meet somewhat different needs.
To further develop their business. Kind-heartedness won't get you anywhere in this game.
I think it's pretty clear by now that this Hakeem guy knows jack shit about economics. And why would he? Oh, I don't want to make it a numbers game, you guys.
This means, in essence, is that if it doesn't make you money, it isn't worth doing.
If it doesn't make you money, it isn't worth doing. Again, this is a common talking point I hear from commies and socialists, like, oh, people only want to do stuff for money. Yeah, why would you want to work or produce if you're not going to get some benefit in return, notably money? And they often like to have this double standard when we're talking about labor theory of value and talking about how if a company ultimately profits partly or largely as a result of their workers, then that's somehow theft, which is a ridiculous notion, but the implication being that their workers should be expected to get paid more. But right here, they don't like the fact that people are only going to be productive if they're going to get money in return. Oh no, the horror, you guys. Heaven forbid anyone make money or be profitable.
Providing safe drinking water? No point. Vaccinations? A money pit. Housing? Why bother? Privatizing water sources, kicking poor people out of cheap housing to build luxury condos, defunding healthcare, now that's profitable.
Defunding healthcare is profitable? That doesn't make sense.
This directly results in millions dying across the planet every year as a direct result of capitalist policies. Malnutrition kills over 3 million children each year, factor in as thousands every single day.
Now, notice what he's citing here. The first one alone, over 5.6 million children under age 5 died in 2016. This is according to the World Health Organization. And this is mostly throughout Africa. Now, if we go to the Economic Freedom Index, if you look at the Economic Freedom Index, countries are ranked from free to mostly free to moderately free to mostly unfree to repressed. And if you look at some of these countries, particularly in Africa, most of Africa, they have an entire region list. Look at Africa, most of their countries are either ranked mostly unfree or completely repressed. The top ones seem to be countries like Rwanda, which recently, if you look at Rwanda, they recently got into this category within the last 2 years, so this is a recently new phenomenon. It's not like Rwanda has had an economy like Germany or Canada for the last 50 years. This is a recently new phenomenon. But if you look at their entire region, the region of Africa, most of these countries are the least capitalist countries in the world. And going to the World Health Organization's website, I think this is a more up-to-date stats. If you look at the top 10 countries with the highest numbers of deaths for children under age 5, you look at all these countries: Nigeria, India, Pakistan, the Congo, Ethiopia, China, Indonesia, and so on and so on. I think all but Indonesia are ranked as either mostly unfree or repressed. And you can just, I'll link to both of these down below for your own time. But yeah, right away, we got the Congo. Congo is listed as in top 10. It's completely repressed. It's on the Economic Freedom Index. Look at Nigeria. It's ranked right here in 116, mostly unfree. We got Angola, ranked number 154, also they're almost in the repressed category, going back here, and they're in this top 10 ranking. Isn't it amazing that the countries that struggle with what Hakeem is talking about the most when it comes to this first statistic, most of these deaths are coming from the least capitalist countries in the world. But because capitalism is a global economic system, I guess we can all blame it on capitalism, can't we?
This isn't because we don't produce enough food, we do. In fact,
he also cites, going back a little bit, another statistic is undernutrition, and I found the report right here. This is from UNICEF. He cites UNICEF as the source right here. And even in this one, it's mostly the same countries. I think with the exception of the Philippines and Indonesia, which are ranked in the moderately free, all of these countries are ranked as mostly unfree countries. And even if you scroll up in the report, it says only one of these countries, China, is making sufficient progress in reducing child undernutrition. And I would probably say that's because China over the last few decades has moved away from communism. Isn't that another convenient point that Hakeem likes to drop? Is the fact that there are two communist countries, Vietnam and China. Now, I know China and Vietnam have both they've both made progress over the last few decades because they have freed up their economies to a certain, if not large extent, but they're still controlled by communist parties. But I guess all of the horrors in Vietnam and China, all capitalism's fault, you guys.
Factor in as thousands every single day. This isn't because we don't produce enough food, we do. In fact, we produce far more than we currently need, even when we factor in the massive waste of food that...
Now, he's saying we produce enough food. He talks about food, all of the food, as if it just all exists out there in the world, and as if it's all collectively owned, or should be collectively owned. No, food has to be produced by someone. It has to be produced by farmers, by cattle ranchers, and so on and so on. If you were to, say, start a garden in your backyard and you start growing carrots and potatoes and corn and lettuce and whatever the hell else you're going to grow in your garden, Say you grow 100 carrots and you end up only eating 82 of them because 18 of them went rotten and you had to throw them away. Is that the same as taking a carrot out of a starving child's mouth in Sudan?
Absolutely fucking not.
It's not like, humanity just lived in the Garden of Eden with plentiful food and resources and then it just got taken over by a few capitalists who just want to hoard it all. No. Even when it comes to food, it has to be produced by someone, and whoever produces the food gets to decide what to do with it, who to sell it to, and for what price. Now, when it comes to the issue of food waste, I don't know how much of it is regulation. Anyone who has worked in the food service industry knows that after a certain period of time, you have to throw food away. So if a restaurant has to throw away a bunch of food because it's spoiled, is that the same as starving children, intentionally starving children in third world countries, as Hakeem likes to imply here? But I'm sure everyone that has grown up in America has wasted food at some point because, you left a bowl of potato salad, or you left an apple in your fridge for too long and forgot about it. You left a box of pancake mix in your cupboard for too long and you forgot about it. And the next time you look at it, oh, it's past the expiration date, and you throw it away. Does that mean you should feel guilty because, hey, you could have given it to someone who needed the food?
It occurs in highly industrialized countries, again, as a direct result of capitalist policies.
It is a direct result of capitalist policies. Now, it's also important to note that poverty is man's default natural state. And in order for man to survive and ultimately rise out of poverty, man has to use his mind and his rational judgment to make decisions in pursuit of his own survival and happiness. And this goes all the way back to even the primitive days of humanity, when humanity had to discover fire for warmth and for cooking, and build tools for hunting and whatnot, build houses for shelter, study the star patterns at night so that you could predict long-term seasons for the sake of agriculture. So if you want people to rise out of poverty, the best political system for them to do so is one that frees them to use their rational judgment, frees them from force, so that they can use their rational judgment to rise out of poverty. In other words, laissez-faire capitalism. Hakeem, if you really care about people rising out of poverty, you should demand that all of these repressed countries throughout the world that are dealing with health issues and malnutrition and food shortages, you should demand that they embrace laissez-faire capitalism instead of your garbage ideology of abolishing private property, which routinely results in repression and famines. Just look no further than the Korean Peninsula, the fact that South Korea embraced capitalism decades ago, and now they have plenty of resources, and they're creating all sorts of goods and services. They're innovating smartphones and automobiles and electronics and all that good stuff. Meanwhile, their neighbors to the north that have embraced communism, well, they're constantly dealing with food shortages and famines.
And even because we don't have the distribution systems, we have that too. And for the places that lack it, it could very quickly be developed. Just look at how quickly mining and fuel companies get to the deepest and most isolated parts of our Earth for that which will make them money. The reasons that thousands of children die each and every single day is because it isn't profitable to save them.
It isn't profitable to save them. Again, bring capitalism to these parts of the world where children are starving.
Treat them, to house them, to feed them. Similarly, and equally sad, is the situation with drinking water. Over 1 million people die each year because of lack of access to clean drinking water. Not only in Yemen or Mozambique, but even in the richest country on earth, the ever-free United States of America. Again, not because we can't provide clean drinking water, but because it isn't profitable to do so.
It isn't profitable to produce clean drinking water. Has this goof been to a grocery store within the last, 2 decades? I can go into a local Ralph's or Vons or Walmart right now, and I guarantee I'll be able to find a case of clean bottled drinking water for less than $3. You can find a case of clean drinking water, probably last you a week, for what, a half hour of work on a minimum wage job that's produced by some of the biggest corporations in the world, like Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola and so on. Oh, but it's not profitable to do so.
The situation with preventable illnesses is equally dismal. Tuberculosis causes 1.5 million deaths yearly. Pneumonia kills 4 million. Malaria kills 500,000. This isn't mentioning other common illnesses.
Now, I like that he brings this up because, we've had chances to reduce malaria through DDT, but the environmentalists said, no, we can't have that. Can't kill the mosquitoes, you guys. But yeah, there are places in the world that that have rampant disease, and who's trying to fill that demand? Who's trying to save these poorer countries from diseases like malaria and polio? It's capitalists like Bill Gates donating his money and using his resources to go into these countries where he has often gotten pushback from the mystic goons who run the governments because they think vaccines are an attempt to control their people or some goofy ass nonsense. The areas of the world that struggle with disease the most are the least capitalist countries, and still capitalists go to these countries and they dump billions of dollars, like Bill Gates dumped billions of dollars into eradicating diseases, and people still blame it on capitalism.
Like hepatitis or other vaccine-preventable diseases. We're talking easily over 6 million deaths each year because it's more profitable to invest and distribute acne and foot fungus cream than it is to provide vaccines and antibiotics to those that don't have.
Okay, so it's more profitable to invest in acne and foot fungus cream than it is to make vaccines and antibiotics. Okay, so first off, what if there's a demand for foot fungus cream and acne medication? You know, if someone has terrible acne or has terrible foot fungus, are they just supposed to deal with it because, hey, other people might have bigger problems? On top of that, this implication that everyone in dermatology, everyone that's involved with clearing up acne and other skin issues, everyone that's involved in clearing up foot fungus, this implication that they would suddenly take interest and passion into making antibiotics and working on new vaccinations is it's presumptuous, to say the least. As if you go up to a dermatologist who has spent years studying their profession in pursuit of clearing up some teenagers' acne and whatnot, as if you wag your finger at them, that they'll suddenly turn around and produce antibiotics? Really? Is that how it works? Not to mention antibiotics. I know this from experience. Antibiotics are a pain in the ass because of regulation. Here in the United States, if I ever get a staph infection, I have to pay $150 to see a doctor so that they can write me a permission slip to get some amoxicillin from my pharmacy. Meanwhile, if I go to Cancun, Mexico, I can buy amoxicillin over the counter. But again, it's all capitalism's fault, folks.
Much capacity to pay for it. Being conservative, that's 10 million excess deaths as a result of capitalism each year. That figure is actually low, in fact, as I'm not.
Yeah. It's 10 million deaths as a result of your goalpost shifting.
Factoring in imperialist wars, intentional destabilization of governments due to either the lobbying or the direct intervention of corporations, or governments especially friendly to corporations, IMF restructuring of governments, and predatory loaning, forcing austerity on populations worldwide, and on and on. These alone can raise it to 15 million, 20 million, or even higher. At this
it might be 5 trillion deaths. Who knows?
Very conservative and very incomplete figure of 10
every death in the world is because of capitalism, folks.
million a year. Within a decade, capitalism kills more than socialism ever has.
I mean, you can apply this logic to someone who dies from just old age. You could say, oh, well, you know, he died at 84, but if doctors stop focusing on foot fungus and acne medication, they could find ways to extend life beyond the age of 84. Ha ha ha.
Assuming socialism killed that many in the first place. Within a century, it can go as high as 1 billion deaths, possibly more. Immediately, the argument falls apart. No matter what way you try to twist it, capitalism is, by its very inbuilt components, a bloodier system.
Capitalism is a bloodier system. This is, again, amazing coming from someone who has Vladimir Lenin as their avatar. Friendly reminder. Let's remember Lenin's hanging order, which was geared toward the kulaks. As you can see, it says, "Comrades, the insurrection of the 5 kulak districts should be pitilessly suppressed. The interests of the whole revolution require this because the last decisive battle with the kulaks is now underway everywhere. An example must be demonstrated. Hang, absolutely hang in full view of the people, no fewer than 100 known kulaks, filthy rich men, bloodsuckers, publish their names, seize all grain from them, and designate hostages in accordance with yesterday's telegram." Now again, is it any surprise that Lenin would come to such a worldview if it were not for Karl Marx? And going back to what I said earlier about Karl Marx and the Communist Manifesto, the ideas in Communist Manifesto motivating goons like Vladimir Lenin, here's an essay that my buddy Stuart Hayashi sent me, called The Victory of the Counter-Revolution in Vienna, which was written by Karl Marx, I believe in 1948. If you scroll down to the bottom, you see that Karl Marx says, "The purposeless massacres perpetuated since the June and October events, the tedious offerings of sacrifices since February and March, the very cannibalism of the counter-revolution will convince the nations that there is only one way in which the murderous death agonies of the old society and the bloody birth throes of the new society can be shortened, simplified, and concentrated, and that way is revolutionary terror." But remember, folks, just ignore that Black Book of Communism because it's just bourgeoisie propaganda, because capitalism, that's the bloody ideology that you should be really worried about.